I'm Amber Hayes, 29 years old, and after 6 years of saving every extra penny, I finally bought my first brand new car, a sleek silver Honda Accord. It was my symbol of independence after growing up watching my parents struggle financially. Imagine my shock when I drove 3 hours to surprise my dad for his 60th birthday, only to find my sister Natalie cruising around in my new sedan. My parents had simply handed her the keys without asking me. What they didn't realize was that I'd already legally signed the car away to someone else, a contingency plan that would save me more heartache than I could have imagined. Before I dive into this wild family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss my next unbelievable story. Growing up in a modest 2-story home in suburban Boston, our family of 4 appeared normal from the outside. My parents, Frank and Diana Hayes, worked hard to provide for Natalie and me, but there was always an unspoken dynamic in our household that became more apparent as we grew older. From the beginning, Natalie was the golden child. 5 years younger than me with our mother's honey blonde hair and our father's charismatic personality, she had a way of wrapping everyone around her finger. I, on the other hand, inherited my grandmother's auburn hair and quieter disposition, preferring books and computers to being the center of attention. The first time I noticed the difference in how we were treated was when I was 12. I'd saved up my allowance for 6 months to buy a special art set, only to find Natalie using it one day, the expensive colored pencils broken and scattered across her floor. When I complained to my parents, they simply said, "She's just a little girl, Amber. You need to share." My property was never really mine, it was always family property when Natalie wanted it. This pattern continued throughout our teenage years. When I needed braces, my parents said we couldn't afford the expensive orthodontia. 2 years later, Natalie not only got braces but the premium ceramic ones that were less visible. "Your teeth weren't as bad," my mother explained when I pointed out the discrepancy. The most painful example came when it was time for college. I'd been accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough to cover all expenses. "We just don't have college funds set aside," my father explained. "You'll need to take out loans or find a cheaper school." I ended up at a state university, working 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load to graduate with minimal debt. Meanwhile, Natalie attended Northeastern University 3 years later, with our parents covering her tuition, apartment, and expenses. When I questioned this, my mother said, "We're in a better financial position now." But their household income hadn't significantly changed. What had changed was which daughter needed support. After college, I moved to New York for a junior software engineer position. The starting salary was modest, but I lived frugally, sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and building my career. Every advancement came through hard work and dedication. By 28, I had secured a senior role at a respected tech company, saved a healthy emergency fund, and started investing for retirement, all without family assistance. Natalie, meanwhile, bounced between jobs in marketing and PR, never staying anywhere longer than a year. When she couldn't make rent, our parents sent money. When she maxed out her credit cards, they helped pay them off. When she decided her degree wasn't fulfilling and wanted to try interior design, they funded her classes. Her apartment in Boston was nicer than mine in New York, despite my higher salary, because financial responsibility wasn't something she needed to consider. "You're so lucky to be naturally good with money," my mother once told me during a phone call, as if my financial stability was some innate trait rather than the result of careful planning and sacrifice. Despite the frustrations, I worked hard to maintain a relationship with my family. I called weekly, visited for holidays, and tried to accept that my parents and I simply had different perspectives. I established boundaries where I could. I stopped lending money to Natalie after the 3rd unreturned loan, and I declined to co-sign when she wanted to lease a luxury car she couldn't afford. "You've always been so selfish with your money," she complained when I refused. "It's not like you're struggling." That comment stung because it revealed how little my sister understood about financial security. To her, money not being spent was money being hoarded. The fact that I lived below my means to build stability was viewed as a character flaw rather than wisdom. After years of driving a used Toyota with over 200,000 miles on the odometer, a car that had seen me through college, multiple moves, and countless road trips, I decided it was finally time to replace it. My financial advisor confirmed I could afford a new car without compromising my other financial goals. After 10 years of adulting responsibility, I was going to reward myself with something nice that I had earned through my own efforts. The Honda Accord wasn't flashy or extravagant, it was practical, reliable, and within my budget. But it was brand new, with that intoxicating new car smell, modern safety features, and a warranty that promised years of worry-free driving. When I drove it off the lot, the sense of accomplishment brought tears to my eyes. This wasn't just transportation. It was tangible proof that I had built something for myself. Little did I know that this symbol of independence would soon become the centerpiece of the biggest family conflict we'd ever experienced. The process of buying my new Honda Accord was a masterclass in careful decision-making. I spent 3 months researching models, safety ratings, fuel efficiency, and resale value. I test drove 6 different vehicles and negotiated with 4 dealerships before finding the perfect combination of features and price. The silver sedan wasn't the flashiest car on the lot, but it had everything I wanted: leather seats, a premium sound system, advanced safety features, and excellent fuel economy. Most importantly, I could afford it without stretching my budget or compromising my other financial goals. On the day I signed the paperwork, the dealership staff congratulated me and took a photo of me with my new car for their social media. Most first-time buyers your age go for something sportier or more expensive than they can afford, the sales manager commented. It's refreshing to see someone make such a sensible choice. That first drive home from the dealership was magical. The new car smell filled my lungs as I adjusted the perfectly positioned steering wheel. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth system and let my carefully curated playlist fill the cabin through the crystal-clear speakers. The engine hummed quietly as I navigated through New York traffic, the responsive handling making me feel connected to the road in a way my old Toyota never had. For the first 2 weeks, I found excuses to drive places I would normally walk or take the subway. My roommates teased me about my new relationship as I spent Saturday mornings washing and waxing my precious sedan in our apartment building's parking area. I even downloaded the owner's manual to my tablet and read it cover to cover, learning every feature and maintenance schedule. When my father's 60th birthday approached in early April, I immediately thought about driving my new car to Massachusetts for the celebration. It would be the perfect opportunity to show my family this symbol of my hard work and independence. Plus, the 3-hour drive would be much more comfortable in my new sedan than it had ever been in my old Toyota. I called my mother to confirm the details of the visit. "We're just having a small family dinner on Saturday," she said. "Nothing fancy." "That sounds perfect," I replied. "I've got a special gift for Dad that I think he's going to love." I'd found a rare first edition of his favorite mystery novel from the 1970s and had it professionally rebound. "Oh, that's nice, honey," my mother said, her tone distracted. "What time do you think you'll arrive?" "I should get there around noon if I leave by 9. The drive should be quicker in my new car." There was a slight pause. "New car? You bought a new car?" I was surprised she didn't know. "Yes, I mentioned it during our call last month. I finally replaced the Toyota." "Wait until you see it, it's beautiful." "Well, that's nice, dear," she said quickly. "Listen, I need to go check on something in the oven. We'll see you Saturday." Looking back, I should have noticed how abruptly she ended the call, or how she didn't ask a single question about my new car, something that would normally prompt at least a few minutes of conversation. But I was too excited about the upcoming weekend to pick up on these subtle warning signs. The morning of my drive to Massachusetts dawned bright and clear, perfect road trip weather. I packed an overnight bag, carefully wrapped my father's gift, and loaded a cooler with snacks and drinks for the journey. Before leaving my apartment, I took a moment to admire my car in the morning light, its silver paint gleaming like liquid mercury after the thorough cleaning I'd given it the day before. The drive north on I-95 gave me time to reflect on my relationship with my family. Despite the frustrations and occasional hurt feelings, I loved them deeply. My father, for all his blind spots when it came to Natalie, had instilled in me a strong work ethic and integrity. My mother, though often caught in the middle of family tensions, had taught me compassion and resilience. Even Natalie, with her self-centered worldview, could be genuinely funny and charming when she wasn't competing for attention or resources. I hoped this visit would be different. Perhaps seeing tangible evidence of my success would help them understand my life choices better. Maybe they'd finally see that my path, though different from what they might have chosen for me, was valid and fulfilling. The navigation system guided me smoothly through the familiar route, and I arrived at my parents' suburban neighborhood right on schedule. As I turned onto their street, I felt a flutter of anticipation. I slowed down as I approached their house, looking for a good spot to park where my car would be visible but not blocking anyone. That's when I noticed something odd. The driveway, where I had planned to park, was empty. My parents' SUV was parked on the street instead. I pulled up behind it, confused but not yet alarmed. Perhaps they had been expecting other guests who hadn't arrived yet. I gathered my things and walked up the familiar path to the front door, still blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break over what should have been a simple family celebration. I didn't bother knocking. After all, this had been my home for 18 years before college. "Hello?" I called out as I stepped into the entryway, the familiar scent of my mother's cinnamon candles greeting me. "Amber. You're early." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She gave me a quick hug that felt more perfunctory than warm. "I'm right on time, actually," I said, checking my watch. "Just after noon, like I said." My father appeared from the living room, reading glasses perched on his nose. "There's the birthday girl," he said, opening his arms for a hug. "It's your birthday, Dad," I laughed, embracing him. "Happy 60. Makes me an official old-timer," he chuckled. "Come on in. Your mother's made her famous lasagna for tonight." I followed them into the kitchen, setting my overnight bag in the corner and placing Dad's wrapped gift on the counter. "Where should I park my car?" "I left it on the street for now, but I can move it to the driveway if you're expecting more company." My parents exchanged a quick glance that sent a warning signal through my brain. "About that," my mother began, her voice taking on the careful tone she used when navigating difficult conversations. "Natalie needed a car for the weekend. Her Jetta is in the shop again." A cold feeling began spreading in my chest. "Okay? What does that have to do with where I park my car?" My father cleared his throat. "Well, when Natalie mentioned needing a vehicle, we told her you had just bought a new car. She was very excited to see it." The pieces started falling into place, but my mind refused to accept the obvious conclusion. "Where is Natalie now?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. Another glance between my parents. My mother answered. "She took a few friends to Cape Cod for the weekend. A little pre-summer getaway." "In my car." It wasn't a question. "Now, Amber," my father said in his placating voice, "it's just for the weekend. Your sister really needed the help, and you always have been so generous." I stared at them in disbelief. "You gave Natalie the keys to my brand new car without asking me? A car that I've owned for less than a month? A car that she doesn't know how to drive and isn't insured to operate?" "Don't be so dramatic," my mother said, turning back to the counter where she was preparing a salad. "It's just a car. Natalie's a good driver. She's totaled 2 vehicles in the past 3 years." I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Those were accidents," my father defended. "They could have happened to anyone." I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. "Did Natalie ask to borrow my car, or did you offer it to her?" My parents exchanged another of those glances. "Well," my mother said, "when she mentioned needing a car, we thought it would be a nice opportunity for her to try out your new Honda. She's been thinking about buying one herself." "Natalie can't afford a new Honda," I said flatly. She's still paying off her credit card debt from last year's emergency shopping spree in New York. That's not very supportive, Amber, my father frowned. Your sister is figuring things out at her own pace. I closed my eyes briefly, gathering my thoughts. When did she take my car? And how? I have both sets of keys with me. I patted my purse where the key fob rested safely in an inner pocket. She came by yesterday, my mother explained. We told her you'd be bringing your new car, and she mentioned her beach plans. It just made sense for her to use yours instead of renting one. The rental prices are outrageous these days. You still haven't explained how she's driving my car when I have the keys, I pressed. My father shifted uncomfortably. Well, you know how you gave us a spare key to your apartment for emergencies? We assumed you had put your new car key on that ring, and you had. The realization hit me like a truck. Years ago, I had given my parents a spare key to my first apartment, and yes, my old Toyota key had been on that ring. When I bought my new car, the dealership had transferred my keychain without me thinking about it. My spare house key, and now apparently my spare car key, had been in my parents' possession all along. You took the key off my emergency house key ring and gave it to Natalie without asking? I clarified, my voice dangerously quiet. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible, my mother said defensively. We're family, Amber. Family shares. You've always been so possessive of your things. The familiar accusation stung. Setting boundaries had always been labeled as being possessive in our household. I need to call Natalie, I said, pulling out my phone. She's probably driving, my father cautioned. Maybe wait until she gets to the Cape. She's driving my car. I think that entitles me to interrupt her journey, I replied, scrolling to find her number. After 4 rings, Natalie picked up. Music and laughter blared in the background. Hey sis. Are you at Mom and Dad's? Where are you? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. Just passing Plymouth. The traffic is awful, but this car drives like a dream. The sound system is incredible. I connected my Spotify and... Natalie, I cut her off, did it occur to you to ask me before taking my car? A pause. Mom and Dad said it was fine. Don't be so uptight, Amber. It's just for the weekend. It's not just a car, Natalie. It's my car that I spent years saving for. You had no right to take it without my permission. I could practically hear her eye roll through the phone. God, you're so materialistic. It's not like I'm going to hurt it. Besides, you can just use Mom and Dad's car if you need to go somewhere. That's not the point. Look, I'm driving and shouldn't be on the phone. We can talk about this when I get back Sunday night. Love you, bye. She hung up before I could respond. I looked at my parents, who were studiously avoiding my gaze. This is completely unacceptable, I said quietly. Honey, I know you're upset, my mother started, but what's done is done. Natalie will bring the car back on Sunday, and everything will be fine. Let's focus on celebrating your father's birthday. You're asking me to just pretend everything is normal after you stole my property and gave it to someone else? Stole is a very harsh word, my father frowned. We're your parents. And that gives you the right to take my possessions without permission? Amber Jean Hayes, my mother said sharply, using my full name as she had when I was a child in trouble, I raised you to be more generous than this. Your sister needed help, and we provided it. I'm disappointed that you're making such a fuss over a car when family should come first. And there it was, the familiar guilt trip, the implication that my boundaries were a character flaw, that my sister's wants should supersede my right to my own property. It was a dynamic as old as our family itself, but this time, they had gone too far. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated something like this might happen. Not specifically with my car, but some boundary violation that would push me to my limit. And I had prepared accordingly. 2 weeks before my visit home, I'd been on the phone with my mother when she casually mentioned that Natalie had been eyeing new cars. She test drove that same Honda model you bought, my mother said. She really loved it but said the silver one on the lot didn't have all the features she wanted. A chill ran down my spine at those words. I hadn't told my mother what color my new car was. The only way Natalie would know I had purchased a silver Honda was if my parents had shown her photos I hadn't sent them. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment, staring at my car keys on the kitchen counter. A suspicion began forming in my mind, one that seemed paranoid yet entirely plausible given our family history. What if my purchase of a new car had triggered Natalie's sudden interest in the same model? And what if my parents, in their perpetual mission to keep Natalie happy, decided that sharing my car would be a convenient solution? The next day, I called my friend Brandon Wilson, a corporate attorney who had helped me review my employment contract when I joined my current company. I have an unusual legal question, I began after we exchanged pleasantries. Is there a way to protect a vehicle from being used by family members without permission? Brandon was silent for a moment. That's specific. Is everything okay, Amber? I explained the situation. My history with my family, the pattern of my possessions becoming communal property, and my concerns about my new car. Legally, if you're the only name on the title and loan, it's your property, he explained. No one can use it without your permission. But enforcing that with family can be messy. The police often consider it a civil matter if there's any familial connection. So there's nothing I can do to protect myself? I asked, disappointed. I didn't say that, Brandon replied thoughtfully. There's a rather unusual solution, but it would depend on how far you're willing to go and whether you have someone you trust implicitly. The unusual solution, as it turned out, was a temporary transfer of ownership. Brandon helped me draw up paperwork transferring my car to my best friend Jessica Parker, with a separate contract between us specifying that I would continue to make payments and maintain the vehicle, and that the transfer would be reversed after 6 months. This way, if anyone takes the car without permission, it's not a family dispute, it's theft of Jessica's property, Brandon explained as we finalized the documents. Isn't this a bit extreme? Jessica asked when I presented her with the plan. I mean, I'm happy to help, but do you really think your family would take your car? I hope I'm wrong, I admitted. But after 29 years of the same patterns, I've learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. As a final precaution, I purchased a small GPS tracker and concealed it in the car's interior. The associated app on my phone would allow me to monitor the vehicle's location at all times. Just in case, I told myself, feeling slightly guilty for the subterfuge. Now, standing in my parents' kitchen with the confirmation that my paranoid preparations had been justified, I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound sadness. I excused myself to use the bathroom, locking the door behind me before pulling out my phone. The tracking app showed my car moving along Route 3 toward Cape Cod, currently near Plymouth, just as Natalie had said. I took a screenshot, then opened my text messages. It happened, I wrote to Jessica. They gave Natalie my car for the weekend without asking. She's driving to Cape Cod with friends. Jessica's response came quickly, what? Are you serious? Do you want me to call the police and report it stolen? I considered this for a moment. Involving the police would escalate the situation dramatically, potentially creating a permanent rift in my family. Despite everything, I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Not yet, I replied. But I'm going to get it back myself. Can you be ready to use the remote disable if needed? When I had installed the GPS tracker, Jessica and I had also added a remote ignition disable feature that could be activated through the tracking app. It wouldn't stop a moving vehicle, that would be dangerous, but it would prevent the car from starting again once parked. Say the word and it's done, Jessica texted back. What's your plan? I looked at the map again, calculating. She's heading to the Sandpiper Resort in West Yarmouth. I'm going to follow her. How? They have your car. I smiled grimly. I'm about to have a headache that requires me to go lie down in a quiet hotel for the night. Then I'm catching the next bus to Cape Cod. I splashed some cold water on my face, took a deep breath, and returned to the kitchen where my parents were now busily preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. It was time to set my plan in motion. "I'm sorry," I said, pressing my fingers to my temple. "I'm getting one of my migraines. The stress of the situation. I need to go lie down somewhere quiet." My mother's expression shifted to concern. "You can use your old room, honey. I haven't changed anything." I shook my head. "I saw a hotel just off the highway. I think I need complete silence and darkness. I'll come back tomorrow when I'm feeling better." "On your father's birthday?" My mother looked stricken. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, genuinely regretful about missing his celebration but unwavering in my resolve. "I'll make it up to you when I get my car back." I ordered an Uber as I repacked my overnight bag, ignoring my parents' continued protests. Within 15 minutes, I was heading to the bus station, my determination growing with each passing mile. The bus ride to Cape Cod took nearly 2 hours, much longer than it would have taken in my car. I spent the journey watching the little dot on my tracking app, which had stopped moving and now appeared to be stationary at the Sandpiper Resort in West Yarmouth. At least Natalie had been truthful about her destination. I arrived at the Hyannis Transportation Center just after 5 p.m. and took a taxi to the resort, a sprawling complex of weathered cedar-shingled buildings overlooking the beach. The late April air carried a chilly sea breeze, and the resort appeared only half full, still too early for the summer rush of tourists. The taxi dropped me at the entrance, and I walked through the lobby, pretending to be a guest as I made my way toward the parking lot. It didn't take long to spot my silver Honda Accord, parked carelessly across 2 spaces near Building C. My heart sank as I approached the vehicle. Even from a distance, I could see it wasn't in the pristine condition I'd left it in. Drawing closer, I noticed a long scratch along the passenger side door and what appeared to be a small dent in the rear bumper. Fast food wrappers were visible through the windows, scattered across the back seat. I circled the car, documenting the damage with photos on my phone, my anger building with each new discovery. A cigarette burn marked the leather passenger seat. Natalie smoked occasionally, though she claimed it was only when drinking. The new car smell had been replaced by a mixture of stale smoke, spilled soda, and the cloying scent of Natalie's favorite perfume. While I was examining the car, I heard female voices and laughter approaching. I straightened up to see Natalie walking toward the parking lot with 3 other women, all dressed in resort robes with wet hair, apparently returning from the spa or pool. Natalie spotted me at the same moment I saw her. She froze mid-step, her carefree expression morphing into one of surprise and then quickly shifting to defensive annoyance. "Amber? What are you doing here?" she called out, continuing toward me while her friends exchanged curious glances behind her. "I've come to get my car," I replied simply, standing my ground beside the vehicle. Natalie reached me, the smell of chlorine and fruity cocktails surrounding her. "Don't be ridiculous. I told you I'd bring it back Sunday night." "That was never your decision to make," I said evenly. "You took my car without permission. I'm taking it back now." Her friends had caught up to us, hovering uncertainly behind Natalie. "Everything okay?" one of them asked. "It's fine," Natalie said dismissively. "My sister is just being dramatic. She's always been super possessive about her stuff." She turned back to me, lowering her voice. "You're embarrassing me. We can talk about this later." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. "The car isn't yours to take. In fact, it isn't even mine anymore." That caught her attention. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the legal documents I had stored digitally. 2 weeks ago, I legally transferred ownership of this car to my friend Jessica Parker. "Technically, you've taken Jessica's car without permission, not mine." Natalie's face flushed. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Why would you do that?" "Because I've learned from experience that my property isn't respected in our family." Looks like I was right to be concerned. I gestured to the scratched door and cigarette-burned seat. Natalie glanced at the damage dismissively. "That's nothing. I'll get it fixed before I bring it back." Stop making such a big deal out of this. I'm not asking anymore, Natalie. Give me the keys. No, she said firmly, crossing her arms. Mom and Dad said I could use it for the weekend, and that's what I'm doing. You've always been the favorite anyway, with your perfect job and your perfect apartment and now your perfect car. Would it kill you to share for once in your life? The irony of her statement was so outrageous that I actually laughed. I've been sharing my entire life. The difference is, I never had a choice. Well, now I do. I tapped a few buttons on my phone, sending a quick text to Jessica, disable it. What are you doing? Natalie demanded. Jessica has just remotely disabled the ignition system, I explained calmly. The car won't start again until she reactivates it. So unless you want to extend your stay at this resort indefinitely, I suggest you hand over the keys. You're bluffing, Natalie scoffed, but I could see uncertainty in her eyes. Try it, I challenged. Natalie fumbled in her robe pocket and pulled out my car key. She pressed the unlock button, the lights flashed and the doors unlocked, then slid into the driver's seat and tried to start the engine. The dashboard lights came on, but the engine didn't turn over. She tried again with the same result. What did you do to my car? She shouted, getting out and slamming the door. It's not your car, I reminded her. And I've done exactly what I said. The ignition has been disabled remotely. No one can start it except Jessica, and she'll only reactivate it when I have the keys and am ready to leave. Natalie's friends were backing away, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. Maybe we should go back to the room, one suggested. No. Natalie snapped. She can't just show up and take the car. We have plans. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Mom and Dad. Go ahead, I said with a shrug. It won't change anything. The car doesn't belong to them either. While Natalie furiously dialed our parents, I texted Jessica an update. Confrontation in progress. She's calling the parents. Hold strong, Jessica replied. You're in the right here. I could hear my father's voice through Natalie's phone, sounding confused and then increasingly alarmed as she explained the situation. She says she transferred the car to her friend. She's disabled it somehow and is demanding the keys. Natalie was almost shouting now, her composure completely gone. Tell her she has to let me keep it for the weekend like you promised. There was a pause as my father apparently responded, then Natalie thrust the phone at me. He wants to talk to you. I took the phone, keeping my expression neutral. Hello, Dad. Amber, what in God's name is going on? My father demanded. What's this about transferring your car? And on my birthday? I'm sorry about your birthday, Dad, I really am, I said sincerely. But yes, I legally transferred ownership of the car to Jessica 2 weeks ago, with a private agreement between us about usage and payments. I did it precisely because I was concerned something like this might happen. That's ridiculous. Why would you do such a thing? Because history has shown that my boundaries aren't respected in this family, I replied calmly. Case in point, my new car being taken without my permission and then returned damaged. Damaged? What are you talking about? There's a long scratch on the passenger door, a dent in the bumper, and a cigarette burn on the leather seat, I listed. Not to mention the trash throughout the interior. I heard my father sigh heavily. I'm sure Natalie would have had all that fixed before returning the car. That's not the point, Dad. The point is that my property was taken without my consent. Again. Just like it's been happening my entire life. A long silence followed. When my father spoke again, his voice was tight with anger. I don't know what's gotten into you, Amber. This isn't how we raised you to behave. Family helps family. Yes, family helps family, I agreed. But real help is reciprocal and respectful. It doesn't involve taking without asking. Give the phone back to your sister, he said abruptly. I handed the phone to Natalie, who had been watching our exchange with a mixture of anger and anxiety. She listened for a moment, her expression shifting from hope to disbelief. But what about our weekend? We have dinner reservations and, she paused, listening again. Fine. Whatever. She ended the call and glared at me. Happy now? You've ruined everything, as usual. The keys, Natalie, I said, holding out my hand. With a dramatic huff, she slapped the key into my palm. I hope you're proud of yourself. Mom and Dad are furious. I'm not happy about any of this, I said honestly. But sometimes boundaries need to be enforced the hard way when they're repeatedly ignored. Natalie gathered her friends and stormed off toward their room, leaving me alone in the parking lot with my rescued car. I texted Jessica that I had the keys and asked her to reactivate the ignition. Done, she replied a moment later. Are you okay? I looked at my damaged car, thought about my ruined relationship with my family, and the birthday celebration I had missed. Not really, I admitted. But I will be. I unlocked the car, grimacing at the mess inside, and began the process of cleaning it as best I could with the limited supplies available. Once the interior was somewhat presentable, I sent one more text to Jessica, heading back to NYC. I'll call you tomorrow. Then I started the engine, which hummed to life immediately, and began the long drive home, away from Cape Cod, away from my family, and toward a future where my boundaries would no longer be optional. The drive back to New York was a blur of highway lights and churning emotions. My phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from my parents and Natalie, but I silenced it, needing time to process what had happened before engaging with them again. By the time I reached my apartment, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but I took the time to properly inspect my car under the bright lights of the parking garage. The damage was even worse than I had initially thought. Beyond the visible scratch and dent, there were scuff marks on the interior trim, something sticky spilled in the center console, and the distinct odor of marijuana now noticeable underneath the other smells. I took detailed photos of everything, then dragged myself upstairs to my apartment. My roommates were already asleep, so I quietly made my way to my bedroom, collapsing onto my bed without even changing clothes. The next morning, I awoke to 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 5 voicemails. I made myself a strong cup of coffee before sitting down to sort through them. The first voicemail was from my mother, her voice tight with controlled anger. Amber Jean, I cannot believe you would embarrass your sister like this in front of her friends. Your father's birthday dinner was ruined because everyone was so upset. Call me back immediately. The second was from Natalie. Thanks for nothing, Amber. My friends had to drive me all the way back to Boston. Do you know how humiliating that was? Mom and Dad are furious with you, and so am I. I hope that precious car of yours was worth destroying your relationship with your entire family. The third voicemail made my stomach clench. It was my father, his voice low and dangerous. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Amber, but this is beyond unacceptable. Your mother is in tears. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By tricking us with some legal loophole and stranding your sister? Call us when you're ready to apologize. The fourth was my mother again, now crying, Honey, I don't understand what's happening. We've always been such a close family. Whatever issues you're having, we can work through them together. Please call home. The final voicemail, left at 3:47 a.m., was my father again, his voice slurred slightly, suggesting he'd been drinking. You know what your problem is, Amber? You've always been selfish. Always keeping score. That's not how family works. Your sister needed help, and we helped her. Simple as that. You've broken your mother's heart with this stunt. I hope you're satisfied. The text messages followed similar themes, ranging from angry accusations to guilt-inducing pleas. Natalie had also sent several increasingly hostile messages, culminating in, Hope you enjoy having no family, because that's what you've chosen. I set the phone down, my hands shaking slightly. Despite anticipating their reactions, the actual vitriol still stung deeply. In their version of reality, I was the villain, the selfish daughter who valued material possessions over family bonds. They couldn't, or wouldn't, see that the issue wasn't about the car itself, but about respect for boundaries and personal property. Jessica called later that morning. "How are you holding up?" she asked after I filled her in on the barrage of messages. "Honestly? I feel terrible and justified at the same time," I admitted. "Part of me wonders if I overreacted." "Amber, they took your new car without permission and returned it damaged," Jessica reminded me. "If I had done that, would you be questioning whether you overreacted?" "No," I acknowledged. "But they're family. Which means they should respect you more, not less," she pointed out. "Have they even acknowledged the damage to your car?" I scrolled through the messages again. "Not once. It's all about how I embarrassed Natalie and ruined Dad's birthday." "Exactly," Jessica said firmly. "They're not mad that they violated your boundaries, they're mad that you enforced them." Over the next few days, I focused on getting my car repaired. The dealership estimated the damages at over $2,000. The scratch was deep enough to require repainting the entire door panel, the cigarette burn meant replacing part of the leather seat, and the mysterious sticky substance had damaged the finish on the center console. The dent in the bumper added another $800 to the bill. I forwarded the estimate to my parents and Natalie with a brief message: "This is the cost of the damage done to my car during Natalie's unauthorized use. I would appreciate reimbursement." My mother replied almost immediately, "This feels very transactional, Amber. Is money really what's important to you right now?" I stared at her response in disbelief. Somehow, holding Natalie accountable for the damage she caused was being framed as a moral failing on my part. After a week of unanswered messages from my family, I decided it was time to break the silence. I sat down and composed a lengthy email addressed to all three of them. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Natalie. I've spent the past week reflecting on what happened, and I feel it's important to express my perspective clearly. This isn't about the car itself, it's about a pattern of behavior that has persisted throughout our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. When you took my car without permission and gave it to Natalie, it wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a lifelong pattern where my boundaries have been ignored, my possessions treated as communal property, and my feelings dismissed when I object. I recognize that my response may have seemed extreme. Transferring the car's ownership was a precautionary measure born from years of experience, not a malicious attempt to trick anyone. I truly hoped I would never need to use it. The fact that none of you has acknowledged or offered to repair the significant damage done to my car speaks volumes. Instead, I've received messages blaming me for enforcing my boundaries and ruining a birthday celebration and weekend plans. I love you all, but I can no longer participate in a family dynamic where respect only flows in one direction. Moving forward, I need the following boundaries to be respected. 1. My possessions are not communal property. Nothing of mine is to be used without my explicit permission. 2. When I express discomfort or set a boundary, it needs to be acknowledged and respected, not dismissed as being selfish or dramatic. 3. Actions have consequences. Damage caused by Natalie needs to be repaired at her expense, not ignored or minimized. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms, but only if these basic boundaries are respected. I hope we can work toward a more balanced family dynamic where everyone's needs and feelings are valued equally. Love. Amber. I hesitated before hitting send, wondering if the email was too harsh or too clinical. But after 29 years of swallowing my feelings to keep the peace, I needed to be clear and direct. I pressed send and tried to prepare myself for the fallout. The response came 3 days later, a short message from my father that simply read, "Congratulations, Amber. You've managed to destroy this family with your selfishness. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm deeply disappointed in the person you've become." Those words cut deeper than any of the angry voicemails or accusatory texts. For a moment, I questioned everything: my actions, my boundaries, even my perception of our family dynamic. Was I really the villain in this story? I forwarded the message to my therapist, Dr. Levine, whom I'd been seeing on and off for the past few years. "Can we schedule an emergency session?" I asked. 2 hours later, I was sitting in her office, ugly crying as I recounted the entire situation. "What if they're right?" I sobbed. "What if I am selfish and materialistic? What if I have destroyed my family over a car?" Dr. Levine waited patiently until my tears subsided. "Amber, I want you to consider something. If a friend told you this exact story, about her family taking her new car without permission, returning it damaged, and then blaming her for being upset, what would you tell her?" I thought about it. "I'd tell her she had every right to be angry." "And if she told you her father said she'd destroyed the family by objecting to this treatment?" "I'd tell her that's manipulative and unfair," I admitted. Dr. Levine nodded. "The fact that this is your family doesn't change the fundamental dynamics at play. What's happening is a classic response to someone changing an established family system. When you enforce boundaries that disrupt the status quo, those who benefited from the previous arrangement often respond with escalating pressure to make you return to your previous role." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You hold your ground," she said simply. "Not out of anger or vindictiveness, but because healthy relationships require mutual respect. Your family may need time to adjust to the new boundaries. Some may never accept them. But compromising your self-respect won't lead to genuine reconciliation, it will only perpetuate the dysfunctional patterns." As painful as it was to hear, I knew she was right. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in my life, I was choosing to value my own well-being over keeping the peace. It wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The weeks following my confrontation with my family were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. Despite the boundaries they had crossed, they had still been a constant presence in my life: weekly phone calls, holiday gatherings, the comfortable familiarity of shared history. Now, silence stretched between us like an uncrossable chasm. Jessica, true to her word, helped me reverse the ownership transfer of my car once the immediate crisis had passed. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked as we signed the paperwork. "What if something similar happens again?" "I can't live my life expecting the worst from the people who should love me best," I replied. "Besides, I've learned that legal documents can't fix relationship problems. Only honest communication and mutual respect can do that." In addition to my regular sessions with Dr. Levine, I joined a support group for adults navigating difficult family relationships. Listening to others share similar experiences helped me realize that my situation, while painful, wasn't unique. Many people struggle with family members who can't or won't respect boundaries. "The hardest part," shared Monica, a woman in my group whose mother continuously invaded her privacy, "is accepting that you can't control how they respond to your boundaries. You can only control your own actions and reactions." Those words resonated deeply with me. I had spent so much energy trying to make my family understand my perspective, as if the perfect explanation would suddenly make them see the light. I was slowly accepting that they might never fully understand or validate my feelings, and that was okay. My boundaries were valid regardless of their approval. 6 weeks after the Cape Cod incident, I received an unexpected text from my mother: "Amber, I miss you. Can we talk?" We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between New York and Boston. Neutral territory where neither of us would feel trapped or defensive. I arrived early, securing a quiet table in the corner where we could speak privately. When my mother walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked. The confident, always put-together woman who had raised me seemed smaller somehow, her shoulders slightly stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug as if seeking warmth despite the mild spring day. "I'm glad you reached out," I replied honestly. We made awkward small talk about the weather and her drive before she finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened, and about what you wrote in your email." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I didn't want to see it," she admitted. "It was easier to blame you for overreacting than to acknowledge that I had crossed a line." Taking your car without asking was wrong, no matter our intentions. Her words washed over me like a healing balm. After weeks of being cast as the villain, this simple acknowledgement of wrongdoing felt monumental. It's made me think about other times we might have ignored your feelings or boundaries, she continued. Like when Natalie would take your clothes in high school, or when we used your college fund to renovate the kitchen. I blinked in surprise. You told me there was no college fund. My mother had the grace to look ashamed. There was. It wasn't much, not enough for 4 years, but it would have helped. We justified using it because Natalie was still years away from college, and we thought we'd have time to rebuild it. She sighed. We never did, and then when it was time for her education, we felt we had to find a way to help her. This revelation should have angered me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of relief. It validated what I had suspected for years. That the disparities in how we were treated weren't imagined. I can't speak for your father or Natalie, my mother continued. They're still processing everything. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand. And I'm sorry, truly sorry, for not respecting your boundaries. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still hints of justification in her explanations, still work to be done in recognizing the deeper patterns. But it was a start. Thank you for that, I said sincerely. It means a lot to hear you say it. Where do we go from here? She asked, uncertainty in her voice. I think we start small, I suggested. Regular calls, maybe dinner sometimes. But with the understanding that my boundaries are non-negotiable. I need to know that you respect my right to say no without being made to feel selfish or difficult. She nodded slowly. I can try to do that. I want to do better, Amber. Our coffee date lasted 2 hours, longer than either of us had planned. We didn't resolve everything, decades of family dynamics couldn't be untangled in a single conversation, but we had taken the first step toward a healthier relationship. My father and Natalie took longer to come around. Dad sent a gruff text a month after my meeting with Mom, your mother says I need to apologize. I still think you overreacted, but I shouldn't have said you destroyed the family. That wasn't fair. It wasn't exactly warm, but for my proud, stubborn father, it was significant. Natalie was the last holdout. 3 months after the incident, she finally sent a check covering about half the repair costs for my car, along with a note, I'm not saying I was entirely wrong, but I should have asked before taking your car. Sorry about the damage. I accepted her partial apology and partial payment, understanding that Natalie's journey toward respecting boundaries would likely be the longest and most difficult. Our relationship remained distant but civil, which was progress compared to the open hostility of the previous months. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed, not just in my family relationships, but in my own self-perception. I no longer felt guilty for setting boundaries or standing up for myself. I had stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world or for having needs and expectations. My car, now fully repaired and back to its original pristine condition, remained a symbol, not just of my financial independence, but of my emotional independence as well. Each time I slid behind the wheel, I was reminded of the stand I had taken and the growth that had followed. During one of our weekly phone calls, my mother asked if I would be coming home for Thanksgiving. I'm not sure yet, I answered honestly. I need to think about it. Instead of the guilt trip I might have received in the past, she simply said, well, we'd love to have you, but I understand if you're not ready. Just let us know what you decide. This small moment of respect for my autonomy meant more than any elaborate apology could have. It showed that real change was possible, even in the most entrenched family dynamics. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road to rebuilding trust with my family would be long, with likely setbacks along the way. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was approaching our relationship from a position of strength rather than obligation. My worth wasn't determined by my willingness to sacrifice my boundaries to keep others comfortable. True family, whether the one we're born into or the one we create, is built on mutual respect, not one-sided accommodation. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed your boundaries? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to enforce their boundaries, even with family. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary.